There are stories that reach out from the dark corners of history, tales that defy explanation and challenge our understanding of reality. Now, imagine being the keeper of such mysteries, the one entrusted to catalogue the inexplicable and guard the secrets that most would fear to even speak of. The air in the archive often feels thick, as if them stories themselves are breathing around me, filling the space with whispers of the unknown. The room is dimly lit, with only the soft glow of an old desk lamp. It casts flickering shadows that dance across the walls like ghostly figures. And today, I have such a story to share with you, an account that remains etched in my memory as vivid as the day I first saw it. As I sit here in my dimly lit office at the Bethnal Archives, surrounded by shelves upon shelves of ancient tomes and mysterious artifacts, I can't help but reflect on the innumerable strange and otherworldly tales that have passed through my hands over the last 7 years. The scent of old parchment, worn leather, dust permeating in the air, mingling with the faint aroma of candle wax, and then outside, the muffled sounds of distant traffic occasionally intrude, but inside here it's mostly quiet. A silence heavy with secrets that weigh of unforgotten histories. As a freelance consultant for this unique repository of esoteric and occult knowledge, I have seen and heard things that most of you would dismay as pure fantasy. But to me, they're as real as the air I breathe. Virgil here, by the way. I've been working as a freelancer for the Bethnal Archives for about 7 years now. Got my level 3 clearance from the Met after 5 years as a consultant detective. Nothing fancy, just an amateur turned pro. Kind of guy they call when things get weird. But they're not sure if they need a priest or an electrician. Studied a bit of the arcane too, though I got my fingers burnt messing with magic, literally. Now I stick to what I know best. Finding answers, following trails and trying to make sure the supernatural doesn't get the upper hand. See, I got a rolling contract with the archives, but the catch is, I have to bring at least one legit case a month. Proof and all. One story that particularly stands out in my memory is a tale of mysterious red orbs that appeared in the alleyways over Covent Garden on one moonlit night. It was cold and foggy, the chill biting at my skin like 1,000 tiny needles, and I've been working late cataloguing a collection of rare manuscripts. The flickering candlelight illuminated the room in a soft, weary glow, making the shadows seem alive. The stillness was shattered when a frenzied young man burst through the door of the archives, his eyes wild and frenzied like a dog. I saw them, Virgil, the orbs, he explained, his voice trembling with trepidation. His words were punctuated by the heavy breaths as if he'd been running for miles. They were floating in the alleyways, moving like the will-o'-wisps, beckoning me to follow. His words hung in the air, each syllable dripping with desperation. I may have raised an eyebrow in inquisitiveness, leaning back on my chair as I mentioned for him to sit down and catch a breath. The room was filled with an eerie quiet, only the sound of that rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. The young man introduced himself as Thomas. He was a researcher with a keen interest in the supernatural. He'd been conducting field work in Covent Garden when he stumbled upon the particular phenomenon. The smell of the damp night air clung to him, mixing with the faint sense of trepidation that seemed to emanate from him. Thomas proceeded to describe how the orbs had appeared out of thin air, glowing a deep crimson hue that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. They moved in a mesmerising dance, leading him deeper into the maze of alleyways and cobblestone streets. Despite his fear, Thomas felt compelled to follow on. His inquisitiveness outweighed his sense of self-preservation. The cobblestones beneath his feet were slick with rain, and the air carried the distant echo of footsteps and laughter from the pubs that lined the streets nearby. As he recounted his experience, I couldn't help but feel a shiver of enthrallment run through me. The archives were filled with similar accounts of sightings, spectral apparitions, and the mysterious lights that defied rational explanation. The scent of an aged book and ink seemed to grow stronger as if the stories themselves were awakening at the mention of the orbs. but to hear such a tale firsthand was a rare and exhilarating experience. I urged Thomas to continue, eager to hear the outcome of his encounter with the red orbs, and he explained how they had led him to a secluded courtyard and the air grew heavy with a particular, almost otherworldly atmosphere, where the orbs began to hum a gentle lullaby that filled the courtyard, the notes seeming to echo off the old brick walls. The scent of tar, fresh grass and popcorn wafted through the air, a combination that made Thomas's senses reel. The wind whispered through the narrow alleyways, carrying with it an uneasy stillness. And then before he knew it, the orbs had vanished, leaving him alone again in the courtyard with nothing but a strange melody lingering in his head, as if it left an imprint, something intangible but undeniably real, just in the corner of his memory. The courtyard was dark, save for the dim glow of the nearby street lamp, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch towards him like skeletal fingers. I listened intently to Thomas's story. I must admit my mind was racing with thoughts of the innumerable enigmas that lay hidden within the archives. The red orbs were just one puzzle of a labyrinth of riddles that begged to be solved, each more alluring than the last. But before I could respond, Thomas suddenly sat up straight, a determined look in his eyes. "Felix, you have to come with me. I can't let this rest," he said, his voice steadying. "I need someone like you to help me make sense of it." His eyes held a glimmer of desperation, the weight of something unfinished that he couldn't carry alone. Now, to be fair, I did hesitate for a moment, but being the shit-hot detective that I am, I've got a reputation to uphold, and the guy seemed pretty desperate. I was a detective after all. My job was to solve mysteries, right? Prove them right or wrong. The room seemed to hold its breath, and I could feel the stories around me urging me to go forward, as if they too wanted to see what lay beyond the pages of the bindings. Without much further discussion, we grabbed our coats and whatever else we could scrounge and made our way outside. As soon as I got out into the nice London air, I felt that crisp, cold, foggy night breeze on my back. I knew I should have worn a fucking jumper. But that pure adrenaline racing through me, knowing I was about to witness something fucking strange, that kept me warm. The streetlights flickered above us, their glow barely cutting through the thickening fog. And as we made our way through the winding alleyways of Covent Garden, Pa stopping by for a quick takeaway coffee, Thomas led the way with an almost instinctual sense of direction, his eyes darting around, searching for the crimson glow. We seemed to walk in silence for what felt like tens of minutes, with the fog thickening around us, muffling the sounds of the city. The air was electric, as if the very atmosphere was holding its breath. Then, just as Thomas described, the red orbs appeared, pulsing, glowing, and dancing through the mist. They moved with an unnatural grace, humming their gentle lullabies. They led us deeper into the labyrinth of cobblestones and shadows. And I too could smell the scent of tar, fresh grass, and I wouldn't say popcorn, but something carnivalesque hung in the air, giving the sense of an otherworldly, almost dreamlike quality. The soft crunch of the footsteps echoed quietly, followed by the dense fog that seemed to press in from all sides. My heart was pounding with enthrallment. This was it, the enigma that had eluded us right now before our eyes. The orbs led us further, weaving through the narrow alleyways until the familiar surroundings of Covent Garden seemed to fade away. We soon found ourselves in, an impossible forest, bathed in this luminescent blue hue. The fog seemed to have settled and was rolling around our feet, and the air carried a stale scent of ancient damp bark. Honestly, it was as if we had landed on an alien planet, or another realm that shouldn't exist, yet there we were, standing in this eerie beauty. The forest seemed endless, the trees towering above us, their branches twisting and curling in impossible ways, and that blue glow cast long, watery shadows, and the humming of the orbs seemed to intensify as they floated ahead, guiding us deeper into the unknown. The rustling of unseen creatures echoed faintly, blending with the distant hum of the orbs. I turned my torch on. I checked my phone. No signal. I wasn't taking any chances, so I reached into the inside pocket of my coat, took out an amulet of protection, said the usual incantations, and put it around my neck. I then took a glow stick out, cracked it, shook it, left it on the floor so I could find my way back. And then, being the good old detective, I took out a pen and paper and my dictaphone to ensure I was logging everything I was seeing. Suddenly, the trees parted. We found ourselves in a small clearing. It's as if the centre was a miniature stone circle, like a tiny Stonehenge, formed by a collection of ancient weathered stones. And then the red orbs began to dance delicately above the stones, moving in unison as if performing some kind of ritual. We stepped back. We didn't want to get too close. The orb seemed to hum with a haunting melody that seemed to resonate with the stones themselves, while the clearing was bathed in a soft, ethereal light, where the shadows seemed to bounce off the stones like dancing statues. Thomas and I stood there, spellbound by the sight. The clearing felt sacred, as though we were witnessing something that had remained hidden for centuries. I felt a strange pull. I kind of sensed that we were on the cusp of understanding something prodigious, something far beyond the scope of our everyday reality. And the orbs continued their dance, their glow growing brighter, the blue hue of the forest blending with the crimson light in an otherworldly display. The air grew thick with anticipation, the melody echoing through the clearing as if urging us to comprehend the spectacle before us. And then, as if the fabric of reality itself began to fray, we noticed something peculiar at the edge of our clearing. Parts of a street, sections of a pavement, a phone box, and scarcely dotted street lamps were interspersed among the forest floor, fragments of modern-day London appearing impossibly out of place. It's as if we were standing in the intersection of two worlds, a liminal space where past, present, and something altogether was converged. This dissonant juxtaposition of urbanity and nature converging together made an unsettling beauty. The humming of the orbs grew louder, their dance more frenetic. Me and Thomas exchanged a glance as both of us were equally bewildered and fascinated. Whatever lay at the end of the path, maybe we were on the verge of discovering something that had eluded humanity for centuries. Or perhaps it was just the exit. Whatever it was, as the sun started to rise, it was clear the night was ending and the morning was coming along. The orbs became fewer and fewer, and the strange forest realm became littered with more and more urban parts, until we found ourselves in the alleyways of Covent Garden. The fog lifted, the scent of ancient bark replaced by the familiar city air, and the distant sound of car engines and early morning chatter began to seep back in, grounding us once again in reality. Thomas and I exchanged another glance, a mix of awe and curiosity lingering between us. It's the kind of feeling that makes you want to dig deeper despite the risks. Whatever we had experienced, it had left a mark on us both. A reminder that there are places where the veil between the worlds is thin, and those brave enough to follow may catch a glimpse of the impossible. As I sat back in the dimly lit office of the Bethnal Archives, nursing a cup of stale coffee, surrounded by the ancient tomes and mysterious artifacts, the memory of Thomas's encounter gnawed at me like a puzzle begging to be solved. The scent of old parchment and wax candles filled the room, mingling with muted sounds of London waking up beyond the walls. I pored over manuscripts and scrolls, searching for any mention of similar occurrences or symbols that could shed a light on the true nature of these red orbs. Hours turned into days as I delved deeper, the bags under my eyes growing heavy with each passing night into the archive's vast collection of occult texts, digging through books that looked like they'd seen better centuries, my mind consumed by the enigma before me. And then, something curious emerged, a pattern of recorded incidents. Ta-da! In the archive, I found a case from 1911, another from 1952, and yet another from 1993. Each account detailed similar occurrences, red orbs appearing, drawing individuals away from familiar streets and leading them into strange, disorientating realms. The sightings occurred every 41 years, as though making a cycle known only to the orbs themselves. As I dug further, I came across the reference to a book written by Cecil Thornborough, an original member of the Wizards' Council during the Victorian era. Thornborough had written extensively on various occult phenomena, but one passage caught my eye. He described fey wisps, creatures from the Celtic otherworld that used their bright lights to lure humans deep into forest realms. According to Thornborough, the wisps were part of a fey mating ritual, leading strangers into their enchanted woods where they would ultimately get lost. And in their dying moments, the Fae would plant seeds in their bodies, using them as vessels for a new life. Thornborough's words were chilling, suggesting a sinister purpose behind their ethereal beauty. He also explained that since the rise of industrial towns and cities, the Fae's influence had waned. The interference of electromagnetic fields disrupted the boundaries between their worlds and ours, as we had experienced. Fragments of our own realm now hung on amidst the magic, making it increasingly difficult for the Fae to ensnare modern humans. The orb's glow was often interrupted by glimpses of the familiar sections of pavement and street lamps, reminders that our world refused to fully surrender to theirs. The orb's ritual could no longer be completed before the first light of dawn, causing them to disperse as the sun began to rise. The connection was undeniable. The Fae had tried to ensnare us, but as they had done to others over the last century, the encroachment of our modern world had created a rift, a type of barrier that they struggled to overcome. The red orbs were no more than remnants of an ancient ritual attempting to survive in a world that had moved on beyond them. For classification purposes, I'm categorising this as a Class 4 temporal and spatial anomaly, a phenomenon that manipulates both location and perception. It kind of blurs the lines between realms. These Fae creatures, once powerful enough to lead humans to their enchanted forests, they're now struggling against the interference of our industrialised world. This case will be logged in section Delta-5 of the archives, designated for occurrences involving Fae activity and multi-dimensional disruptions. You know, it's not just about understanding the past, it's also about recognising how these forces still linger, or how they adapt to a world that no longer believes in them. As always, my search for answers continues. Now, containment and safety measures. The presence of these red orbs and their attempts to lure individuals into otherworldly realms raises a crucial question. Can we contain such anomalies, or at very least, protect those who may inadvertently encounter them? Containment of a temporal or spatial anomaly of this nature is a daunting task, but there are steps that can mitigate the risks. Number 1, first and foremost, awareness is key. Without really revealing the true nature of the paranormal and occult to the public, what we could do is do a safety campaign. We could have subtle warnings about the dangers of wandering alone in certain areas of Covent Garden at night, and we can disseminate these through local businesses and community boards. Maybe warnings that simply advise avoiding poorly lit alleyways after dark, or suggest unusual lights should not be followed, framing it more as a matter of general urban safety. For a more direct containment, we could ask the Bethnal Archives or our allied organisations to coordinate with local authorities. We could install surveillance cameras, and if those anomalies take place, we could send a team down to guide people away from the potential danger areas. We could always get the government involved, but that's always tricky and very long-winded. In terms of physical containment, it's unlikely that the Fae themselves can be contained, as their nature is inherently tied to the freedom and the flow of energy between realms. However, ritual wards could be placed in areas with frequent sightings to create boundaries to dissuade or hinder the Fae from crossing over. Problem is, of course, these wards would have to be maintained by trained individuals familiar with the appropriate arcane rites and symbols. I mean, I've got a couple of old hands I know who dabble in the occult, however, they aren't cheap. And as we know, money is tight these days. We could use protective amulets or charms, distribute them to people who are most at risk, such as people who work nearby, but yeah, that's really not a good idea giving magical items to, what do we call them, muggles. And it's also worth noting that these orbs thrive on the veil between realms being thin, and we also know that electromagnetic devices will stagger and stall some of them veils. So what we could do is stick some more 5G towers around there. We could get some technical consultants to work on refining the technology that's more in line with doing safe electromagnetic bursts. So, there's some options there, but yeah. Anyway, that's all we've got time for today. If you've enjoyed it, like, subscribe, follow, and I'll see you next time.